souls. I am so excited to welcome today's guest. We were talking before this even started, and I was like, we have to hit record because it's so good. This is just who she is. So, Dr. Samantha Hart is in the house. She is a physical therapist, best-selling author, performing artist, podcast host, and sober mama of two. She's been featured on CBS, ABC, in People Magazine, Us Weekly, In Touch, Time Magazine, and the New York Post for her expertise on the intersection between mind-body health and wellness. She has this self-help memoir called Breaking the Circuit: How to Rewire Your Mind for Hope, Resilience, Joy in the Face of Trauma. And so it's a really powerful book that is trauma informed, where she's taking the 12 steps to recovery for those that, are moving through either addiction or not, so that they can turn their pain into power. So, Samantha, thank you so much for being here. I truly cannot wait to dig in with you.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this so much since the second I met you and you told me what you did
Mhm.
for work in the world. I'm like, well, that's brilliant. And we have so much to talk about.
Yes, like the beginning of like just a huge budding relationship where it was like all the stories and things we've been talking about offline, where I was like, can we record this? This is just
Mm.
so like I feel so connected with you and your energy and your spirit and your wisdom. Like I'm just so grateful to just share you with everyone that's leaning in. This is definitely an episode you want to lean into. So thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to, peel back some of these layers so people can really get to know you.
I have never been more ready in my life to
Yee.
share what's on my heart. And
Yeah.
when I think back to whether I always had this kind of courage, because people have been saying quite a bit how brave I am
Mm.
for letting the world know all the things that have happened to me. And when I was young, I knew nothing about a boundary. So
Mm.
I overshared. I did what Brene Brown calls hot wiring intimacy. I
Mm.
would tell everyone everything in the hopes that they would love me
Mm.
enough. And of course, it was with people who didn't earn the right to hear it.
Mm.
So inevitably, there was gossip and
Mhm.
backstabbing and name calling. And I would always be angry and devastated. And, and the difference today as a grown, sober woman who's done so much work on herself is that for the most part, to the best of my ability, when I share, I'm sharing, I don't want to say from a healed in past tense place,
Mm.
from a healing
Mhm.
place as
Yeah.
opposed to a wounded place. And
Powerful
that's
distinction.
That's so important. And
Yes,
the
it
reason
is.
I feel compelled to do it now is not because I need you to love me. It's not
Mhm.
because my worthiness is contingent on whether you accept what I have to say.
Mhm.
It's because I love myself so much and I've done so much excavation on
Mhm.
clearing away the shame that I was carrying in my cells that I believe is the most corrosive thing we carry inside of us. And I want other people to feel just a little bit less ashamed of whatever they're carrying.
That resonates so deeply. Like as you're saying that, I'm recognizing that piece of myself where, yeah, it's very similar story to me where it was like I would just share and then I just expect everyone would just keep it, like, okay, sure, I'll keep that to myself. And it was because I was sharing from a wounded space as well. And then I did all this healing work. And now it truly is like I share because I'm doing the healing work. It's not the open gash anymore where I need someone to help me, fill it or whatever that void was. It's like, no, I've done so much work already. There's always still work to be done, like you were saying. But
Mm.
because we have done so much of the work, it's really empowering. Like when I witness someone who is in the healing process share their story, I feel more empowered because I know that there's hope on the other side. So there
Exactly.
is a big difference between when someone is sharing it after they've done the healing work, and there's always more, like we were saying, but there's a difference because then it's like, ooh, there's something empowering here that I can kind of grab onto and make my own and kind of shift into that. So I would really love for you to dig into like if we could travel back in time. So being this sober mama of two, you talk about how recovery has been a huge part of your journey.
Mm.
So and it's been a huge spiritual awakening for you too. I'm curious if we could travel back in time. Was there a moment where you had almost like this like rock bottom moment where you were like enough is enough. This is where it ends and where that journey has kind of led you from there?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about my rock bottom is, like so many addicts, it wasn't when I overdosed on cocaine.
Mm,
And that happened the same day that I got accepted into a doctoral program
mm,
because I was going to celebrate
mhm.
and I knew how.
Yeah.
And surely, like everything else in my life, I could control that too. So I had
Mm,
been dabbling for 10 years on and off with substances that was highly normalized in my house.
mhm,
I was quote unquote really high functioning. I had the grades, I had the boyfriend, I had the body, I had the apartment, and I could work hard and play hard. So
mhm,
this day felt no different than any other day. But then this really scary thing happened. You would think that that would be my rock bottom. The average person who doesn't struggle with substance abuse would think it was insane to
mm.
use ever again, at least cocaine. But it wasn't. It wasn't. So if we fast forward, I tried to cut and paste, change the cocktail of things I was putting in my body.
Right.
I did try to go to one meeting with the one person that I knew was sober. And I was like, nope, absolutely not. Not for me. The language doesn't resonate. It's religious, cultish, patriarchal, archaic. I'm way
Mm,
too smart for these people. I don't look like them. I don't drink like them. I don't use like them. So that was that for about a year and a half. And I just switched what I was doing from uppers to downers pretty much. My father was the family enabler in the dynamic. So he would bring me prescription medication whenever I needed it. I was living with a guy at the time, and after a year and a half from that overdose, the guy I was living with found the prescription pill bottle and looked at me with such disdain in his eyes. And I knew in that moment, not only had I already lost control of drugs and alcohol, it was pretty clear to me, but now I was losing him. Though
mm,
that look was, you disgust me. And
mm,
I'm 1 foot in and 1 foot out, if not 2 feet out now. And the idea of him leaving, which at that point was really the only proof I had that I was worth anything at all, it
mm,
was unfathomable to me. And so I called that guy who took me to that meeting a year and a half earlier. His name is Bobby. And I said, I guess I got to go back to a meeting. I don't know. That wasn't my rock bottom either, though, right? Because it was outside of me. It was
mhm.
a fear
Right.
of losing him that
Yeah.
made me go into the rooms.
Yes.
Nevertheless, I went, and eventually, though I despised the language and I let Bobby know that, I did believe Bobby. I believed him. He was 22 years sober from heroin addiction, and his energy was bright and big and beautiful. And I believed that he had recovered from this horrible thing and had a really happy life. And so I thought, will you just work with me, knowing I don't believe in God? I hate this religious thing. I don't want to be told what to do, but I know I have a problem and I don't want this guy to leave me. All right, kid, let's go. So for the next year, he took me around to meetings all over Manhattan. I'm from New York. And I got a little bit better. I had some aha moments. I wouldn't call any of them a spiritual awakening or a
Mm,
rock bottom, but I was making a start.
yeah.
And I was in grad school. I was moving through the program. I had a chance to go to California, where my boyfriend, who stayed with me despite his resentment, was thinking of moving to.
Mhm,
So Bobby started to act weird, different. I couldn't put my finger on it. Towards the end of my first year, he just felt distant in an unfamiliar way. And we were friends before he was my sponsor. I used to be his personal trainer at
mhm,
Gold's Gym in Midtown Manhattan. So I thought, well, I don't want to ruin the friendship. I don't know what's going on with him, but I let him know, hey, I'm going to California for 8 weeks for grad school. I'm going to get a temporary sponsor. Let's just go back to being friends. So I do that. I come out here and I see a world of possibility for the part of me that dreamed of being in entertainment because we were in
mhm,
LA,
mhm,
dancing and singing and also physical therapy. There were these doors opening and I wanted to tell Bobby all about it. and he never picked up his phone. And I got so pissed. And finally, 4 weeks into me being here, his wife picked up and she said, Bobby relapsed. That's why you
Mm,
haven't heard from him. It was like being sucker punched. It made no sense to me. I had no idea the monster that was addiction. None. I was completely clueless. She said, maybe you can see him when you get back. But right now he's unavailable. I don't know what to tell you. That
mm,
was the first thing I wanted to do when I got back from California is see Bobby. I saw Bobby and it was as if somebody went behind his eyes and blew the light out. It
mm.
was like being in the presence of a ghost,
Yeah.
right? Where somebody's body is alive and their essence, their beautiful spirit that makes them unequivocally who they are is dead.
Yeah.
I was so frightened
Mhm.
by that experience. We met up one more time and then I realized I can't do this right now.
Yeah.
I can't be around this. I knew at that point I wanted to stay sober, but now this person, the only thing I really trusted and believed was failing as a resource to give me the kind of faith required to hang on.
Yeah.
And so I decided I needed to take some space and work with somebody new.
Mhm.
And 2 weeks later, I got a call that Bobby jumped out of his 8th story window and killed
Mm,
himself. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because that also wasn't rock bottom.
mm,
What that was a deep, frightening moment where I knew that addiction was out for blood and it didn't care if I had 50 days or 50 years. If that light went out and I did not cure my soul sickness at any given time, it was coming for me.
mm,
Because if it killed a guy like him, it was definitely going to kill a girl like me. So, what did I do? I had no real program. I had no new tools. I was really reliant on my boyfriend's love for me and
mhm,
Bobby's faith.
mhm.
Still, everything outside of me to
Right.
make me feel whole and safe. But I ran for 5 more years under this deep programming that if I could just perfect
Mhm.
the world around me, I would be okay. I would be worthy of love, connection, and belonging. And boy, did I try. And the thing is, perfectionism, type A ism,
Mhm.
workaholism is culturally revered.
Mhm.
Gosh, you can get so many pats on the back, so many paychecks, so
Mhm.
many external accolades, but you can be dead inside while
Yes.
you do it.
Yep.
And my marriage, because that guy that found those pills was my boyfriend and then my fiance and then my husband. After we got married, and I thought, oh, we made it through all the hell and high water because I had cheated and lied so many times when I was in my active addiction, but he stayed. He loved me anyway. I was good enough. And then he pulled away and he pulled away. And he pulled away. And the more he pulled away emotionally, physically, financially, the more I unraveled.
Mhm.
I went insane in sobriety, physically abstinent and spiritually bankrupt.
Mm,
And it was not until reaching the brink of insanity. And what I mean by that is every second of every day, fighting, begging, pleading for him to just do the thing I needed him to do so I would be okay. God damn it. Will you
mhm.
just?
Mhm.
So much so that I moved out, slept on couches, begged to come back home. He said, I don't think that makes sense. Found another house to sleep at for a month. It was miserable. Begged him to come back home. I don't think it makes sense. Found another place, sleeping on an air mattress in my friend's apartment, waking up to her cat pissing on me in the middle of the night, begging
God,
him
you're
to come
like, "Come
back.
on."
This was my life. This was my life
Yeah.
in sobriety.
Yeah.
And after that third time that he said, I don't think it makes sense for us to live together right now. We're not in the right place. I had a sober girlfriend say, Samantha, if you're not ready to leave your marriage, you have to find a place that is your own. You cannot live like this.
Mm-hmm.
It was so frightening to me, the idea, because it was proof. If I signed a lease, it was proof that it didn't work. That this thing I had been running on in my nervous system that had worked for so long to keep
Yeah.
my mother happy when she was sad, to keep the peace, to feel a sense of worthiness in my life, to make everyone else okay at the expense of myself, that it didn't work. When I signed that lease, it meant I didn't know who I was and I didn't know who I was becoming.
Mm-hmm.
But I had no idea what else to do because I didn't want to die. I just didn't know how to live anymore.
Ooh. Yeah.
So I
Mm-hmm.
signed the lease. That was rock bottom. That apartment, unfurnished, with a mattress on the floor, 16-foot ceilings, and me laying on my back staring up at the ceiling, despondent, depressed, empty, thinking, what am I going to do now?
Mm-hmm.
That was rock bottom. I believe rock bottom has to be spiritual,
Mm.
not just individual, so unique to every single person, which is
Yeah.
why nobody outside of that person's suffering can make them stop or change or be done. And why so many addicts die before they get there. I was the lucky one. I probably would have relapsed and died if Bobby hadn't. But
Mm.
I was so afraid. So I white knuckled my recovery for 5 years, doing what I felt I had to do to stay safe. Because I was told growing up, the only people who believe in God are fools. And the only person you can count on is yourself. And boy, did I try.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in that apartment, the right person who was in more than one 12-step program, and that part's really important.
Mm-hmm.
She walked into my life and she said, what if we did the steps on your marriage? What if we made them apply to the crisis that you're in so they can resonate? Well, that sounded like it made a lot of sense to me. So we did. Once we trudged through those steps in that way,
Mm-hmm.
changing the language and making the words land in my nervous system in a
Mm.
way that felt safe,
Mm-hmm.
finally,
Mm-hmm.
I started to recover. And what I mean by recover is recover my capital S self, my
Mm-hmm.
highest self, particularly when we got to the ninth step, which is making an amends.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my 30s. I was a recovering perfectionist, among other things. I ran off of self-ridicule, never enough, do better next time. The fear of if that voice stopped, then what would I create? Who would I be? I'm nothing without my inner critic. She was sitting in the seat of CEO of my life, and she was killing me. She didn't mean to, but she was killing me. And when we did the ninth step, this woman said, have you ever made an amends to yourself? Nobody had ever asked me that question in my whole life. If that's not trauma informed, I don't know what is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the beginning of a practice. And when I say practice, boy, do I mean it, of
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness, of
Yeah.
compassionate self-talk. Forgiveness, like all matters of the heart, is not linear. It is not as if I stood in front of a mirror and did the mirror work and looked at myself and said, I love you, Samantha.
Mm-hmm.
I forgive you for everything you did when you weren't well. And I was relieved of my shame. No, that is not what happened. But slowly, the shame started to lift. I had practices. I had ways to interrupt the negative self-talk, to break the circuit, if you will,
Mhm.
that had been so hardwired and baked into my nervous system. And as I did that, I could finally hear the whisper of my intuition,
Mm.
which I now call God. I
Yeah.
have no problem calling it God. And it was so good to hear her again.
Mhm.
God, she had been silenced by years of gaslighting growing up because God forbid I spoke up and said what I wanted to say like children do.
Mhm.
That shit was shut down early. And then I doused her with drugs and alcohol and a perfect body and perfect grades. I hadn't heard the sound of her voice in decades. And she started nudging me in new directions. And I knew it was a different part of me because it sounded totally different. This is the part where when people ask, I'm sure you get this all the time. How do you tell the difference between fear and
Yes.
intuition? You know, how do
Yep,
you
I was gonna
know? How
ask
do
you
you
that. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so, first of all, there's a physiologic difference in the
Mhm.
body.
Yeah,
So, one really helpful thing is to tune into what's happening to your body,
totally. That is what I
right?
share too. Yes.
It's
Share more.
so important,
Mhm.
especially because the people who are precisely struggling with that are very cerebral. They're totally
Mhm.
heady.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
living in between their ears, trying to
Yes.
figure it out.
Mhm. Yep.
so, so for me, there's a couple things, right? When I become obsessive and ruminating, when I am in a space of, okay, I'm just gonna, if I just figure this thing out, if I just come up with the, if I'm trying to conjure up the answer,
Mhm.
it's immediately my perfect voice. I
Mhm.
feel constrictive. I feel a chronic running anxiety, like a very low grade pit in my stomach.
Mhm.
Everything feels crunchy and
Yes.
small and squeezed and forced. When it is my intuition, I'm never trying.
Yes. Exactly.
And top down. I'm gonna figure it out and tell my body what to do. It it rises up. It comes from the belly up.
Mm.
It rises up. It's clear. It's like four C's: clear, calm, curious, and compassionate.
Mm.
I feel open. I feel calm. I feel expansive.
Yes.
It's completely different.
Mhm.
And what's really tough is, this is a series of things that happened to me in order for me to get reacquainted with that voice, right?
Right.
So so I almost died. I hit a spiritual rock bottom. I had to do all this really painful work to start clearing the shame. Then I started to hear it, but still, if I didn't listen, if I didn't take an actionable step in the direction of my intuitive voice, I wouldn't know that there was hope on the other side of it, that there could be a whole new way of living, a
Right.
whole new way of running a business. In that marital crisis, my intuition suggested that there might be a way to do physical therapy where you're not just treating people's symptoms and you're not broke for the rest of your life, drowning in student debt, but that maybe you could assess the need of these patients in this very broken market and fill it and make a real difference in people's lives and make real money.
Mhm.
But then I had to act on that suggestion
Absolutely. That's
and
part of it.
see the wins.
Yeah.
Then it was easier to trust it. So there's
Exactly.
a leap. You have to be, in my opinion, so sick and tired of being sick and tired. You have to have exhausted all of these old coping patterns that were there for good reason for a
Mhm.
long time that really, really helped you when you were young. You have to be done and so afraid of staying in the dysfunction that whatever fear you have of taking the leap and trusting your intuitive voice is less scary. And
Mm.
so you jump. That is my experience. I wish it wasn't so dire for so many people, especially addicts. I wish I could wave a wand. People ask me all the time, with the person that they love that's struggling, that they're afraid will die. What should I say? What could I say? What could I do? I wish there
Mhm.
was the right words to make somebody done.
Mhm.
There isn't. And the best thing I think we could say to anybody we love who's struggling is, in case nobody told you today, I'm so proud of you and you're doing a great job.
Yeah, that deep acknowledgement piece. And I love through this process of, even the 12 steps where you were like, wait, acknowledge myself. Wait a minute. Talk to myself. Like that relationship, I feel like is so lost. It was so lost for me for so long too, where I was like, I actually one of my coaches, I remember hiring a life coach when I was kind of in a situation where I'm like, I am so unhappy. There's got to be something else. Like I don't know what it is, but I was at that moment where I'm like, this just isn't it. So I started working with a life coach, and I remember her doing an exercise called the 5 levels of why. And so she asked me a question, and then gave her the answer, and she said, "Well, why? Why though? Why would you do that?" And gave her the answer, well, why? And then got down to the very answer and the very bottom. And the last answer was because I don't like myself. And I remember being like, it was twofold. It was like, oh, that's heavy. And like, oh, that's a problem. And two, oh my gosh, there's so much I can do with this because that's not working for me anymore. Like, I don't want to not like myself, let alone not love myself. You know what I mean? It's like, whoa. So it was like, okay, that's a relationship I actually get to work on. I had no idea it was living under the surface. All this self sabotage that I was doing was because I just didn't like myself at all. And it was like,
Mm.
well, that makes a lot of sense why I've been doing what I've been doing. Let me start to rebuild that relationship. But we have to be in those kind of, I guess you could say, mirrored spaces. I never would have
Mhm.
known to ask myself those questions or to go deeper,
Yep.
and so through journaling or through coaching or healing or whatever that looks like, it's really powerful to start to get to know ourselves, acknowledge ourselves, and then take the relationship deeper. Like you were saying, through time. Like it's not like, oh, I just love myself because I noticed I hate myself. It's like, no, no, no. It's like a normal relationship. We have to like start to romance ourselves a little bit or get to know each other, be friends first,
Yep.
and then
Exactly.
take yourself down that journey of now I'm like, I remember she had me do this exercise of like, write 100 things you love about yourself. And I remember being like, oh, I don't even know 5, at that time. And now I'm like, bitch, make me do 1,000. Like, I'm like, let's go, like I could do like 10,000 today because of the
Mm.
healing work that I've done. Because
Yes.
it's not like this false sense of confidence or cockiness. It's like, no, I
Yep.
just am so deeply in love with who I am that I'm not shaming or judging for the most part.
Exactly.
The things that I used to that I notice beautiful things about myself and others now because I can see it within myself first.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
love that you just said we have to get to know ourselves. And I do
Yes.
feel like in that it was about 8 months in that apartment, you
Mhm.
know. It was also the first time I lived alone,
Mhm.
and when we were planning our wedding, I let my husband do everything. Kind of
Mhm.
unheard of, right? The woman usually does it all, and historically,
Mhm.
whatever, bridezilla. Nope. I was so passive. I had
Mhm.
no idea. What color flowers you want? What color? I don't know. Purple.
Yeah.
And in that apartment, I was like, well, nobody's going to furnish this for me.
Mhm.
So I would go into stores and look around and finally say, well, what do you like?
Yes. Yeah.
I fell in love with the color blue.
Mhm.
It is all over the walls, paintings I have. Last night I was just speaking at an event. I had this gorgeous blue dress on that
Mhm.
matched the cover of my book, which
Mhm.
has that bright blue. And every time I wear it, I think about that time in my life where, God, you were 30 years old and it was then that you figured out what your favorite color was, among
Mhm.
other things, among
Yeah.
other things. But it was like, yes, I was dating myself
Right.
for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that so interesting? Because I had quote unquote "no opinion" for so long that I was just like the people pleaser, like, "What do you wanna do? Well, where do you wanna eat?" And they would say the answer, and in my head, I'd be like, "I don't wanna eat that, but sure, sounds good." And so it took me a long time, or not a long time, it took me a I mean, it's still a relationship I'm cultivating with
Yep.
myself, like deepening into that, finding my authentic truth, but the more that I find her, the more I'm like, wow, like things are coming into my awareness because the thing with the universe is when we're saying yes to something, even if we don't want it, we're going to be served more of it, right? We're telling the universe, I want more of this thing. And then if we say no to something, we actually and it's like the opposite is true. But so I started realizing, well, wait, if I got to know myself and I started saying yes to the things that actually really, really lit me up, I'm starting to put myself in situations where I'm receiving more of it, where I'm like, I'm going to this event because it's really lighting me up because I actually do want to go. And now I'm meeting other people that like to do this too. So they're inviting me to new events and things like that, where it's like, it's very interesting how it starts to work. It's like every piece is a breadcrumb. So just take the first step, let it be the breadcrumb, and then it adds to itself. The puzzle starts to, form itself. And then you start to be like, oh my
Mhm.
God, I really know myself now. And you know what I love about you too is like so beautiful is like you are multi-passionate. Like when I was just reading your bio and just getting to know you and all of these things, I'm like, it's so beautiful how you honor all parts of yourself now through this journey of getting to know yourself. You're like, look, I'm an artist, I am a performer, I am a speaker, I am an author, I'm a mother, like I'm all these things. And so I would love for you to even speak about like how that's actually enhanced your life and your business by
Mhm.
knowing what you love and leaning into these different pockets because I know I've worked with so many coaches that are like niche down. You got to do, you got to just have it be so specific. You can't like play in different areas. And it's like, I love that you are and it works for you and it expands who you are. And I'd love for you to talk more about that.
Yeah. I have quite a bit to say about that. So, for 10 years, I had a private practice
Hmm.
and I loved it. I got to treat people how I really wanted to treat them and earn a living.
Hmm.
And of course, being an empath and somebody on a healing journey, I was always paying attention to emotionally and spiritually where the person was at and trying to meet them there. But I'm not a psychologist. I wasn't doing therapy. I was their physical therapist. I was the body expert. But the more I recovered, the more sober lived experience I was gathering up, the harder it was for me to see the soul sickness in the
Mm.
person.
Mm.
But I did the best I could,
Hmm.
straddling the tension between what I was seeing, meeting them there in the scope of my practice, and trying to heal their knee pain or their back pain.
Right.
And then on March 13th of 2022, I got a phone call that I had been dreading my entire life because I come from a long line of addicts. I come from a long line of emotional cycles of dysfunction, like martyrdom, denial,
Hmm.
mental illness. And I'm the cycle breaker. But sometimes that is a lonely and painful road when you watch the people you love the most stay sick.
Hmm.
And on March 13th, I got a call that my sister died of a drug overdose. And I had been dreading that call.
Mm.
And most things in sobriety in life that you dread, that you future trip about, don't come to pass. But what if they do?
Hmm.
And in that moment, a part of me died too. But I knew I had a few choices. I could relapse and die like Bobby did, but I didn't want to die. I could spend the next months, years, or the rest of my life running numbing out like I had done unsuccessfully when my father died a few years before that. Or I could fully live.
Mm.
I knew in that moment that I had to write a book. I didn't know what it was going to be about, but I knew I had to write. And I knew that I could no longer just be Samantha, doctor of physical therapy, running a clinic. I knew that whatever I was doing next, wherever I was going, all of me was coming.
Mm.
Now, I had no plan about what that looked like. I
Mhm.
just had the gnawing, the
Mhm.
knowing that I deeply trusted at that point. So I subleased my space and I started writing. And what started as a memoir became a self help memoir because really the goal of the book is to help as many people as possible, which you can do to an extent with powerful storytelling. But I wanted to be a little prescriptive for the people
Mhm.
who were really willing to do the work. I wanted to cast the widest net on who I could help. And when I really asked myself, well, what helped you? What was your rock bottom? When did your life change? It was when I worked those steps in a modern and trauma informed way. And I thought, well, why can't I be the girl who 12 stepped the world?
Mhm.
Why is this the best kept secret? And to this day, in 2024, with everything we know about addiction, childhood trauma, and mental illness, why hasn't anybody updated these steps? I
Mm.
knew I was going to piss some people off
Mhm.
that like an ancient sacred tradition, just like yoga.
Mhm.
But I have knee pain and chair pose in yoga doesn't work for me.
Mhm.
Biomechanically, it's not friendly on the knee. So I'm going to hold my posture differently
Yeah.
because I know better. Same
Mhm.
thing with the steps. If you are suffering, you are not just a self centered piece of shit
Mm.
causing wreckage everywhere you go. You are hurting people, but you are deeply hurting yourself. So let's start by making amends to ourselves first.
Mm.
So, in the process of writing this book and staying open to letting parts of me that I hadn't tapped into show up, I started to say yes to things like teaching a dance class at a gym, which, by the way, I had done when I was in my 20s and thought, I'm way too good for that now. I had taught at all the fancy places in New York, real studios where the real dancers go. I'd done it in LA. I was momming real hard now. And I thought,
Mhm.
I'm not going to go, I'm not going to teach a gym. I had an opportunity. The teacher was like, yeah, we need to find another dance teacher. My hand just went up.
Yeah. Right.
Right? I just said yes. The reason I bring that up is because this was going on while I was writing my book. And about 3 months into teaching the class, this young man who I didn't know and had never met was poking his head around in the back, not inside the studio, outside, considering whether he should come in or not. He walks in 30 minutes late, and I'm thinking, oh, God, this guy is either going to be a fool and have no idea what he just did, or he's going to be amazing and crush it 30 minutes late, in which case I'm going to want to have a conversation with him. So that's what happened. He crushed it. I looked at him. We're in the suburbs. Okay. We are not in the thick of LA where talent walks into a dance room, right? We're in a family oriented place
Mhm.
far out of the city. And I said, who are you? Where did you come from? Turns out he's a recording artist who was in a really successful boy band when he was younger. And now he's a solo artist. And I'm thinking, childhood dream to be a choreographer, to get a record deal, all these things. I said, do you have a choreographer? No, actually, I'm looking for one. We should go have coffee.
Mhm.
So we did. We connected. That was important to me first, right? I was grown now. I didn't need that to be loved, but I wanted it.
Mhm.
So there was an energetic connection after which I said, can I take one of your songs and choreograph? See if you like it. Sure. I did. He liked it. And he said, you're hired. He was going on a 2-week tour to Japan, 5 different cities. He was reluctant at first. He was scared. We had just met each other. That would be a big trip for us to take as new friends.
Mhm.
It was a financial gamble to hire me, but he did. So at 40 years old, while I'm writing my book, I checked off a bucket list dream and I went on a 5-city tour as his choreographer and
Mm.
swung my hair around like a fool and had the best time of my life.
Yes.
And then he heard me sing in the background while we were there. And he said, can you sing? And I'm like, yeah, kind of. I just, that was some dream I had and it's gone somewhere to not to die, but just to rest and, whatever. Well, we should produce music. We should make music. So as I'm writing the book, in between these bouts of grief and confrontation of my hardest life stories, I had this cathartic, incredible creative outlet because he
Mm,
lives 5 minutes away from me.
right.
So we started making music. And then when he got booked for a gig in LA, he said, do you want to perform with me? And I was like, yes. Are you kidding me? So we start going to all these events, all
Yes.
these red carpet events. And I'm like, what is happening to my whole life?
Mhm.
Literally, what is happening? And I'm meeting all these industry people. And it's been a dream of mine to write a screenplay. And of course, people chime in. Maybe you should get your book out first. Maybe you should see if it does well. And then you could write the screenplay. And I'm thinking to myself, no, I think once I get the heavy lifting of writing this book out of me, because I don't want to do both at the same time, that would feel like way too much emotionally.
Mhm.
When I've done all the content and all of it's been edited, and my publishing company now is sort of taking on the load, and we get into the funner parts of writing a book,
Mhm.
like, what do you want your book cover to look like? Oh, I
Mhm.
definitely want blue.
Woo!
The
Yeah.
creative part, right? The
Yeah.
marketing strategy. Then maybe I can work with a professional screenwriter because before I became a PT, I almost went to graduate school for screenwriting. I had always loved writing. But as
Mhm.
soon as I chose PT, it was science and then it was starting a business and figuring out how to run a business. And all my creative stuff just went over here somewhere. All the
Yeah.
dancing, all the singing, all the writing. And so all this stuff was getting kicked back up in me. So I wrote this screenplay. And now I'm having a chance to record with a Grammy award winning musician, a
Mm,
multi platinum producing engineer and musician because they heard my story and they're like, "Well, you're not 19 trying to get a record deal,
mhm.
but you got all this stuff. You're basically creating a brand."
Mhm.
Which wasn't my plan. My
Mhm.
plan was I have to write, and wherever I go, I have to bring all of who I am. And every single 24 hours, I am chasing down joy and truth like the air that I breathe, because that is all that matters to me now. Because grief does not discriminate, it will show up when it wants to. None
Yes.
of us will escape this life without losing people we love. So, what are we going to do with our one wild and precious life? And when my sister died, whatever shackles remained around me, around what I was allowed to do with my
Mhm.
life, you can't do all those things. You got to do one and do that thing really well. I call bullshit.
Mhm.
It doesn't scare me. It scares me to lose someone else that I love.
Right.
That's scary.
Mhm.
Showing the world who I am and all the talents I have and tapping into both hemispheres of my brain, that does not scare me. That lights me up. That
Mhm.
makes me feel whole inside. I have never felt more aligned with my purpose in the world than I do now. And here's what's so fun about the timing of this conversation, Christina.
Mhm.
My book came out on June 10th. It's an Amazon bestseller, which is insane to me. I had started to notice I was getting attached to outcomes, which I've spent so much of my recovery trying to surrender to.
Mhm.
And I did some work around it. I cleared that out and I said, you are not here for the title. Okay. We know that that would open doors faster, but you're here to help people. You're here for the long game, and your
Mhm.
book is going to do that. So let it go. And then I get this best-selling title, right? And I'm preparing all these events for myself because I'm a speaker. They just haven't paid me yet.
Mm.
So until I get tapped on the shoulder and someone says, we're going to pay you to come, you need to come to this event and be a speaker, I'm going to create those events for myself.
Mhm.
Why not? And I'm going to add musical elements in. I'm essentially
Mm.
creating accidentally a one-woman show. Who
Yes.
knows what this thing could turn into, but I've done it a few times now. I
Mhm.
give a talk. I have musical interludes throughout the talk that enhance some of the emotional components of the story. And then at the end, I sing and I perform. And the people I'm working with now who see the brand and the vision and this movement that I started accidentally of wanting to 12-step the whole world, they're like, what if we make music that corresponds to the messages in your book? What
Ooh.
if we really tap into you as an artist and not just make bubblegum pop because you
Yeah.
have a message that's way stronger than that?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of music I'm making right now. Like Alanis Morissette, but 2024 version. Okay.
Yes.
So on June 30th in Hollywood, I had one of these events. It was in this gorgeous hotel. And at the last hour of the event, everyone went up to the roof to hang out. And there was this woman sitting at the bar. She wasn't at my event. She kept looking at me. And I'm like, who is this person? Said, hey, I heard, you have a book that just came out. You just spoke. That's really amazing. Congratulations. What is it about? And I'm talking to her a little bit. And I also heard you do music. I'm like, yeah, I do. I actually do a lot of things right now. And, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. I have no idea who this woman is, right? No.
Mhm.
She said, you are what we call in my industry a multi hyphenate.
Mm.
We love people like you. Your agency must be so proud. And I said, well, actually, I'm not represented by an agent yet. But I sure hope that when that opportunity shows up, it's just like this. And they see the value in bringing all of me wherever I'm going. And she said, I'm going to order your book and I'm going to give you my card. She gives me her card. I don't have a clue. I'm not paying attention to any of these things. The biggest agencies, because the truth is, all this shiny shit that's come in. I just was on the cover of a big magazine, right?
Mhm.
Shiny, shiny, glittery. Oh, I went on tour. Oh my God, I'm at People magazine. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me. You could take it all away, and I'm sturdy inside.
Mhm.
What I'm doing is so much bigger than all those things, right? So
Mhm.
I'm not paying attention. She gives me her card. And I'm like, oh, is this your cell phone or is this your work line? Because I'm already thinking, well, she must be in the industry. I want to make sure I have a real way to stay in touch with her and not just have this be some flighty, uh,
Mhm.
superficial conversation. And she said, no, I'll give you my cell. Anyway, later on, when the day winds down, I look at the card. I call my music producer and I'm like, so this thing just happened, blah, blah, blah. And this is a music producer who's been on tour with the Goo Goo Dolls, Michael Jackson, Gwen Stefani. He's a real deal. He goes, who is it? And I said, it says WME. And he starts laughing. He's like, Samantha, that is the largest talent agency in the world. That is the agency that represents the biggest, 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 biggest people. And if you look on their website, you fit in almost every single category
Mm.
of things that they represent. You are the perfect candidate. So that was, a week and a half ago.
Mhm.
The woman has my press kit.
Mhm.
She's going to share it with her colleagues. She's reading my book. I don't know if I'm going to get a meeting or if I do, if they're going to sign me. I fucking hope so. But I was fine before that happened, and I will be fine if it doesn't.
Mhm.
Because I'm on a train rushing toward my destiny and
Mhm.
people are either going to get on the train and come with me or they're not.
Right.
But god damn it, it feels good to have somebody see all these parts and say, "Yes."
You know why? Because you did. You saw it first. You know what I mean? Other people aren't gonna
Yeah.
see it until you see it first. They're not meant to. They're not supposed to fill the void. We're meant to fill it first, and then people mirror back what they see. Wholeness, right? Woo! Oh my gosh, Samantha, I could talk to you for 12 more hours and I will offline. Like, whoa. But I know that you want to gift this book to 10 people, right?
I do.
That, yes. Okay. So we're going to drop that into the show notes. So the first 10 people to click the link, fill out your information, are going to get a signed copy of this incredible
Yes.
book. So please lean in, read this book. Like, it's going to absolutely transform your life. And Samantha, where are you hanging out? I know that everyone listening is like, I need more Samantha in my life, like right now. Where can people get in touch with you?
The best way to connect with me is on Instagram, honestly, at Dr. Samantha Hart, and Hart is spelled Harte. You can also go to my website. It's exactly the same, drsamanthahart.com, and see all the things I'm up to. I'm based out of LA. So if you're local, we can literally meet up. I'm doing all kinds of coaching and one on one work, not just with the physical body, with the spiritual body. I have a community that I've started online called Cycle Breakers that's super affordable, where we can gather together and heal together with like-minded people. And it's $12 a month. And you can also work out and have your physical body
Mm,
be tended to by somebody who's forward thinking about injury prevention. So
yeah.
it's really a mind body online forum and hub that's super affordable. And then I'm speaking. I'm speaking. So if you catch, my Instagram, there's so many sound bites of what I have to say. Obviously, you can buy my book. You can listen to my podcast, which I have too, called The Truth About Addiction. There's just so many ways. But if you just punch in Dr. Samantha Hart, you'll find me.
Mm. Well, I was so inspired just listening to your story. And I know that this is just the beginning for us and for everyone who's tuning in, who's connecting to your energy. This is just the beginning. So, to everyone who tuned in, thank you so much for giving us your most precious resource, your time. We are eternally grateful for you. Feel free to take a screenshot of your favorite moment and share that with us. We love to hear from you about what really resonated. I know I create content based on what you share. Like, I want to lean in and pour in the spaces that you find significant. So please share with us your favorite takeaways. We are eternally grateful for each and every one of you, and we will talk to you very soon. Until next time.